Hi there, welcome to Cellular Respiration lecture video number 5. This is the 5th video of this series. So today's video is going to focus on the steps called the citric acid cycle. So let's first go back to the main, the overall summary, and so we can talk about where we're at today. So in previous lectures, the last lecture, we talked about modifying pyruvic acid and turning it into acetyl coenzyme A. All right, so we're here right now. We're at acetyl coenzyme A. When that took place, NADHs were made, carbon dioxide was released, okay? And those things, we're talking that CO2 is what ends up in the air. This is us exhaling carbon dioxide. NADHs, along with NADHs here and FADH2s there, they're gonna all get used in what's called the electron transport chain to produce the majority of the ATP that is done during cellular respiration. So in case you forgot, the whole goal is to make a lot of ATP, and in this case 38 ATP. To make most of that ATP, a lot of NADHs and FADH2s need to enter the electron transport chain. All right. So the citric acid cycle is the breaking down or the oxidation of acetyl-CoA through a bunch of different steps, and those steps will yield a little bit of energy and a lot of NADHs and FADH2s. Okay. Also, this is us exhaling more CO2. All right. So let's go through the citric acid cycle and break it down in detail for you. All right. So here it is, the citric acid cycle. I'm going to go over it in detail on the next page where it's bigger. What you need to know. All right. Well, we have a new electron carrier. FAD comes into play. And FAD, right here, if you look, it gets reduced. If it gets reduced, it gains hydrogens and electrons, and it becomes FADH2. Another review, NAD plus comes into play. It gets reduced and turned into NADH. That happens in several locations here. Okay, so what is produced during the citric acid cycle? Let's point them all out right now. NADHs get produced. FADH2s get produced. A little bit of ATP, 2 to be exact, get produced, and some carbon dioxide is produced in this process. What is happening along the way? Oxidation, 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 oxidation is what's happening along the way. And those oxidations are connected to reduction, 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 and a reduction. Now, sometimes your body doesn't start, just so you know, your body doesn't always start with sugar. There's certain people who are on no sugar diets, so their body needs to get fuel from other sources, okay, like lipids, like oils or fats, or proteins or carbohydrates. But molecules other than glucose, different types of things, can enter the cycle. So they would enter, your body may convert them into citric acid, for example. So it would skip the modification step of pyruvic acid because it'll never get to pyruvic acid because it didn't start out as glucose. So if you don't start out with glucose, something has to enter the citric acid cycle. So what they do is your body can convert them into something like citric acid, and then now citric acid can do the citric acid cycle. All right, so that's what these statements are saying here. Molecules other than glucose may enter the citric acid cycle at various points. Okay, let's see. Let's go through them. Where does this take place, in case you're wondering? Well, it takes place in this blue area called the matrix. It's the internal area of the mitochondria. So there's the outer membrane, the inner membrane, and on the inside there's the matrix. So that's where the citric acid cycle takes place. All right, so now let's go over the citric acid cycle. So let's start with step 1. Step 1 starts out with this chemical over here. You don't need to know the name of it. It's a 4-carbon chemical, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 carbons. It's called oxaloacetate, but you don't need to know that. This 4-carbon molecule starts a process. What it does is it combines with the 2-carbon acetyl-CoA that was produced in the previous step, and it makes a 6-carbon molecule called citric acid. This is why it's called the citric acid cycle, also known as the Krebs cycle, because Krebs discovered this cycle. All right, Dr. Krebs. So the first product is citric acid, and that's why it's called the citric acid cycle. Now, citric acid has a lot of energy in it. All right, this is a high energy molecule. This molecule can get oxidized a bunch. So as it gets oxidized, step 2, it gets oxidized. And in this process, in this case, a carbon dioxide gets broken down in this reaction. So what happens is a carbon gets broken off, and that carbon is released as carbon dioxide. So citric acid is getting oxidized, NAD plus is getting reduced, forming NADH. All right, so this is one of the major products of the citric acid cycle. Now we have a 5-carbon molecule that gets oxidized some more. How do we know? Because NAD is getting Over here, it's getting reduced, forming NADH. When this happens, another carbon is broken off, and that is released as carbon dioxide, leaving the cycle. And in this third reaction here, some ATP is formed. ADP is getting phosphorylated, so a phosphorus is being added to it, making ATP. They actually make 2 ATPs during the citric acid cycle. So now you have a 4-carbon molecule that gets oxidized some more, and in this reaction, FAD gets reduced, forming FADH2. All right. This 4-carbon molecule gets oxidized some more. NAD plus gets reduced, forming NADH. And now we're back to the start with our 4-carbon molecule ready to do it again. It's ready to start the cycle all over again. Okay. So the citric acid cycle, the main products, 2 ATP, NADH, and FADH2 are the major products. The waste product is carbon dioxide leaving the cycle. Stop there.